Hey guys, Dave Keller here with Market Misbehavior, doing a series of videos which I call A Pilot's Guide to Investing, relating my experiences trying to learn to fly a Cessna 172R with my experiences learning to invest in the stock market and ETFs and other things. Over my career in the industry, I started learning to fly airplanes and immediately was taken to the similarities between those two things. As an investor, your job is to make decisions by taking the emotions out of the picture as much as possible, not having a visceral emotional reaction to what happens to the markets, the flickering ticks on the screen, but more have a disciplined process based on gathering evidence and making a rational decision. And it's so funny, as I started to learn to fly, I found it was the exact same sort of mindset that you needed. So applying a pilot's mindset to the markets has been super successful for me, and it's helped me to coach investors to make better decisions using some of those concepts. So today, earlier in a previous video, we did Be Prepared, which is all about flight preparation, flight preparedness, using checklists as a way to get your plane ready and get your portfolio ready, get your process ready before you pull the trigger, before you get in the air. Today we're going to talk about the second piece, which is be aware, improving your market awareness, or what I would call your situational awareness. All right, so A Pilot's Guide to Investing, I think of it in three pieces. First is be prepared. It's all about what you do before you pull the trigger with a decision. Second is be aware. It's all about having a good sense of what's around you and improving your situational awareness. That's what we're going to talk about today. The third piece is be ready. It's all about emergency preparedness and preparing yourself for the unknown, having a good game plan just in case the unexpected happens, which tends to happen a lot as an investor and also as a pilot, unfortunately. If this sort of thinking about investor decision-making, process, routines, and just thinking about how you think as an investor, that sort of thinking is helpful for you, please consider subscribing to my channel. Hit a like and put a comment below the video. Tell me what you think. What do you struggle with in terms of your awareness of the markets? Where do you feel like you have a good handle? Where do you think you could improve your awareness of the markets? Let's get to the discussion. So when I talk about be aware, I really hit on the phrase situational awareness. And I was introduced to that concept when I, again, started going through flight training and was taught the importance of having an awareness of what's going on around you as a pilot, inside the airplane, outside of the airplane. And it became such an important lesson to me in terms of situational awareness that when I launched my own financial firms in 2017, I called it Sierra Alpha Research. And that's really a slang, Sierra Alpha for SA, or situational awareness. It was such a central concept. And I found that as a coach for investors, for financial advisors, one of the things I could add the most was observing the markets and then helping people improve their situational awareness, what I call their market awareness. It's all about knowing what's working and what isn't working, leaning into what's working, leaning away from what's not working as an investor, and those are the lessons that I try to push forward. I had great lessons about situational awareness along the way of my experience trying to fly an airplane, and one particular story I'll share with you now. It was my first night flight. So as you learn to fly and have about 80 hours or so, mostly in a Cessna 172R, and you have to do a certain number of hours, couple hours of night flying, which means between dusk and dawn. So you think of it as not being that different, but visually it's actually a much different experience, because during the day, you can see the horizon very clearly. You can see obstacles on the ground. You can see obstacles around you pretty easily. And you can tell the difference between the sky and the ground pretty easily. Those are all things that are pretty straightforward. But at night, on a clear night, you have stars in the sky. You have lights all over the ground. So, if you're in a populated area. So it's not easy necessarily to just look and see, the difference. Obstacles are harder to pick out. So things like phone towers, buildings, mountains, obstacles, other aircraft, other things, clouds can be very difficult to pick out if you're not careful. And so you can put yourself in a situation where the plane, you're not in a good place. And so you're taught basically to get comfortable with that environment, to think about the communications, which can be a little different because some towered airports, the tower is no longer manned at night. So you have to change the way you communicate. And things like that. So it's getting comfortable with that. So the first night flight I had, we took off from our airport outside of Boston. We headed southwest toward the practice area, which is just a unpopulated area where we could do maneuvers and be pretty sure we weren't going to get in anyone else's way. So we're kind of headed that area, and my instructor, who's in the right co-pilot seat, said, all right, do you see anything around 10, 11 o'clock that you need to be aware of? So I'm like, go over, I kind of look straight ahead. I'm like, nope, I don't think. I think we're good. And I kind of go back to the section. I've got the map on my lap. I've got a red light, flashlight, so you don't hurt your eyes trying to look at and looking at the instruments and everything. It's like, all right, are you sure about 10:30? There's not something really important. So now I'm starting to think, okay, clearly there is something important right over there. So I start glancing over and I look. And sure enough, I see another airplane. See the lights, clearly a headlight. They just deviated enough that I could see their headlight basically coming right at me. And I said, all right, I see another, I see traffic right there. And he said, yeah, you're pretty close to being on a collision course. It's not super comfortable. So, one of you has to adjust course, or you're just gonna be too close. So we tried to radio the other pilot, unable to do it. We weren't able to get any response. So, he just pushed the yoke forward, went down about 500 feet, flew underneath the other plane. They just kept flying same path they were on. We flew back up to the same level, and he said, all right, yeah, if we hadn't have looked, if we hadn't have changed course, it would have been very difficult to literally come into contact with another airplane. There's a lot of space up in the air, so I don't know if that necessarily would have happened, but we certainly would have been way closer than we should have been for safety reasons, right? You want to make sure that you have clearance between all the other aircraft out there. So had we not changed course, we probably would have come way too close than we should have. And it was a great lesson to not get so caught up in what I was trying to do in terms of navigation, what I was trying to do in terms of where we were headed, thinking about maneuvers we were going to do. I'm already thinking about stalls or bank turns, whatever we were going to be practicing that day. And my head was somewhere else, and it wasn't on just look around and gather as much information as you can. And what that lesson taught me is just to always be diligent about reviewing where you're at relative to where you could be. And so, as a pilot, you're taught to always glance across your instruments, just do a quick check-in and make sure everything is looking as it should. It's looking, randomly at the ground, looking for visual cues that you can look down to your map and make sure you're navigating effectively and that you're at the right place, checking your altitude, making sure you're flying correctly, there's no issues with the plane, but also looking outside, and you're taught to do sort of like a snaking with your eyes and glance left and right along the horizon. Just make sure that you're not seeing anything that is unusual or that you should worry about. So what I've learned is, as an investor, my best experiences, my most successful experiences as an investor, and with successful investors I've worked with, they have really good routines. They have a process for market awareness. They develop a good situational awareness of the markets by having a regular process for evaluating the landscape, for understanding what's working and what's not. I would also tell you, outside the scope of this video, but they also have a very good self-awareness. They have a good ongoing dialogue with themselves, and they think about what they do well and what they do poorly, and they leverage their strengths, and they find ways to minimize their weaknesses by surrounding themselves with processes and resources to help address those. But we'll hit that in another video. For this, we're talking more about situational awareness of what's going on outside of your head, outside of you. And so for investors, what we talk about is basically having a disciplined process, a regular routine for understanding the markets. And for me, obviously coming from a background of investor psychology, technical analysis, behavioral finance, for me, it's mostly done through charts. So I have a morning coffee routine. Every morning I look at the same set of charts, and I open up about 16 Chrome tabs on a browser window, and I start on the one on the left, and I go through each one of them every morning, left to right, just to make sure I'm seeing how everything looks. And by doing that every morning, I know how the chart of gold is evolving, how the 10-year yield is evolving, how crude oil and the dollar and Bitcoin and the S&P and small caps and non-US stocks and China and everything. I have a sense of what all those charts look like because I look at them every single morning and just review where they're at relative to my expectations. Then I have a weekly routine. And for me, my weekly routine starts every Thursday, finishes every Monday. So I start on Thursday because I write a client note to my Sierra Alpha Research subscribers on Friday midday. So I sort of get that process started on Thursday. Saturday into Sunday, I'm doing a macro review, and then Sunday I try to look through all 500 S&P 500 charts individually one by one to look at each of the patterns and start to draw conclusions about overall inflection points, what groups are rotating higher and lower, which ones are outperforming, underperforming. Then that leads up to Monday, where my show on Stock Charts TV called The Final Bar, the Closing Bell show, I'm able to talk about those three parts of the market, the macro view, the sector rotation view, and the stock specific view, because over the last couple of days, I've gone one by one through each one of those and analyzed them very deeply. So that process for me has been going on for years, and I've tweaked it at times. It's not the same that it was years ago when I started it, but I learned early on from guys I worked with at hedge funds on trading desks that they had a process that they followed every morning. I remember going on the floor of the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, and traders there, futures traders, would actually go to the Bloomberg terminal, which was off the floor on the side, and they would look at the same chart of the S&P and the NASDAQ, some other things. They'd look at the same exact chart every morning. Same time, they'd go over there, they'd look at the chart, they'd make some notes, and they'd go to the pit. And that was their process. And I thought that was such a genius way of doing it. The value, what they bring to the table in terms of their market awareness is by doing this consistent thing every single day, which means changes, incremental changes are magnified for them because they have an astute awareness of what's happening there. So that is my question for you. What do you do to be aware of the current market environment? What is your morning coffee routine? When I say morning coffee routine, I mean you sit down, you get ready, you get dressed, you brush your teeth, you have breakfast, you sit down, grab a cup of coffee, you fire up some information portal, right? Some website, some system. What is it? What are the things that you look at? What's your morning coffee routine? What's the very first thing you look at? Because think about that, because that is priming your brain. You better be looking at something that is appropriate for your time frame, for your investment horizon. I would say if the first thing you bring up is financial media, financial TV, newspaper, something like that, I would argue that's not ideal. I would be looking at, if you're a longer term investor, I would be looking at longer term data. The first thing I look at every day, I'm not kidding, is a weekly chart of the S&P going back about 7 years, 5 to 7 years. I look at it every morning, and it doesn't change really at all day to day, but it just reminds me of the long-term trajectory. If I'm trying to understand the long-term trend in stocks and thinking about cyclical and secular trends, I want to start every day by focusing on the long-term trends in stocks, and then everything else is additional to that, is subsequent to that starting point. So think about, what is it you look at first every morning? What is your morning coffee routine? What are the set of things that you are looking at? What order do you progress through those? What's your weekly routine? When do you have a time every week where you take a step back and focus on the big picture and think about how the picture has changed from one day or 1 week to the next? Think about all those things. I encourage you to do it. In the comments below, share with me, when you think about your market awareness, what do you feel like you have a really good handle on? What do you think you have less of a handle on? What is an area, either a particular asset class, a particular time frame, a particular technique or investment approach that you feel is underrepresented in your daily and weekly routines? Let's work on it together. I hope this was helpful. Again, if it was interesting to you, if you like this sort of discussion about investor behavior, decision-making routines, processes, charts, hit subscribe for my channel. I'd love to have you follow along my work, sign up for the notifications, and put a comment below. Let me know what you think. From everyone here at Market Misbehavior, I'm Dave Keller. Be well. Talk to you again soon.